Welcome, everyone, to the Feminine Atlias podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Zelda Wasal
and Cholwe Mandona.
And we are excited to have you here with us. So welcome back to another episode. I know it's been a while since we have last released one, and we just have a few housekeeping things to talk about. One, we are actually going to be changing our publishing dates from a Wednesday to a Friday. That just works best for both of us. So it's just been a lot of transition these past few weeks. So we just wanted to let you guys know that we're actually going to be publishing on Fridays from now on. So excited to, release more episodes for you guys. There's a lot more we have coming up that we'd like to discuss and, talk about. So excited for what the future has to hold. But yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that before we get into the topic of the day. And today is a career series episode. And we are talking about burnout in the workplace. So in general, I would see, like most people have experienced, well, I'd assume a lot of people have experienced some kind of burnout at some point in their life. But workplace burnout tends to be one of the rather challenging places to experience it because, it's your workplace. There's a certain level of professionalism you need. You kind of need to work to get, to sustain yourself, to sustain your life. And there's just a whole lot of nuances that are involved in workplace burnout. So we obviously will talk about it from our standpoints, what we've experienced, how we've dealt with it, what are some good tips for dealing with it in general, because I think it's just something that affects many of us in life. Even if it's not at the workplace, burnout can creep up in other ways. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this episode and that you learn something from it. And as always, we would love to hear what you guys think and what you guys have experienced in regards to, workplace burnout. So to start with, Cholwe, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about workplace burnout?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it as you were introducing the topic, and the thing that I was thinking about or asking myself is what causes burnout. Kind of like more of like who's to blame or what's to blame. And I'm using the word blame not in a negative tone, but just trying to pinpoint where does it start from. And what came to my mind was expectations and wanting to meet expectations that have been set, whether it's by the employer or maybe by myself if I'm the one in doing the work. So I was just kind of thinking like what causes it. I don't have all the answers, but I was just kind of thinking, when you first start a job, there's excitement, a new adventure, the opportunity to learn something new, and you sign your contract, you sign your offer letter, and so there's this period of a honeymoon phase, I would say, or this feeling of what you could do and how you can share your skills with the world. And I guess I'm thinking to myself, what leads to that burnout? Is it I've run out of steam? Okay, because those are now the symptoms where I've run out of steam. I can't perform this with the same enthusiasm and energy that I was doing because of these things. And the first thing that I was just thinking about is it unrealistic expectations, or is it that things have gotten to a point where I just need to rest and get back into the game once I've refueled myself? So those are my
Mhm.
initial thoughts. It's not, obviously, like I said, it's not a comprehensive answer, but I don't know. I was just thinking, where does it start? Where does it really truly start from?
That's a really good way of starting thinking about it, because you have to deal with the root cause of the problem if you're actually going to deal with the problem. Because other than
Mm,
that, you're just going to be plastering and just covering things up. And, anything in life, dealing with the root cause is the most important thing. So I like how you talked about unrealistic expectations. I'm pretty sure that plays a role into workplace burnout. And so I think
mm-hmm,
that's a good way of starting. It's like, really, why does it exist? Where did it come from? So,
mm-hmm,
a definition that I got off the internet is: workplace burnout is an occupation related syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stresses that have not been successfully managed. So, burnout can be measured and quantified using validated scientific tools. It involves ongoing emotional exhaustion, psychological distance or negativity, and feelings of inefficacy, all adding up
mm,
to a state where the job related stressors are not being effectively managed by the normal rest found in work breaks, weekends, and the time off.
mm. Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. So burnout is excluding the typical resting, as they say, resting periods, going home, going to sleep, waking up. So that means
Hmm.
then the way the work is being performed is beyond that. Okay. And I'm guessing there are several reasons why that could happen.
Hmm.
Um if a person has been given more work to do than they can actually do, but the performance requirements are still the same. The quality that needs to be produced by this person still needs to be the same. But I've heard some people say, I'm doing the role for that is technically for two people, but I'm only one person.
Right.
Uh, yeah. So that can severely lead to burnout. Um, and yeah, I
And
don't know. What are your oh
that is exactly what you were saying about unrealistic expectations. That's like an example of that. Like one person doing the work of two people. Um,
mm-hmm,
but starting out, I feel like I think we should both talk about our own experiences with burnout in the workplace. For me,
mm,
it's I'm definitely not a stranger to it. I just feel like
mm,
I'm really good at I would say masking it and just moving on, because my work um my line of work requires that. So,
mm,
I experienced this especially like in residency. Uh, for those of you who don't know, I'm a physician. And so I just graduated last year. This is my first year as an attending. So I'm right
mm-hmm,
fresh off residency. And Cholwe knows, I'd have 24-hour plus shifts, crazy shifts here and there. Or like you'd be working day one time, then your schedule just randomly shift to nighttime.
mm,
Usually there are a couple of months I just have one day off. And the rest of the ways, the days you're working 12-hour shifts, that's 6 days in the week for like a whole month straight, with just 4 days of rest. So I was no stranger to being burnt out, because at some point
mm-hmm,
your body is just like, what are you doing?
mm,
Like, what is going on? I mean, yes, the body kind of like is forced to adapt, because when you're dealing with human life, you have to somehow just keep it going. but it
Yeah.
still shows up in different ways. I would say like even the burnout started as a medical student, but but that was in a different way. But how I realized I was burnt out at work was one, I'm the kind of person who, I think I mentioned this before, stress tends to affect me physically. So it
Mm.
manifests itself in physical symptoms. So if you start to
Mhm.
have like aches and pains or this problem, that problem, a lot of times it's like your body's just stressed and you're burnt out, and that's how it starts manifesting itself.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people who, when they're burnt out, they start having migraines. Like I talked to my friend recently, and um, she said the company she was working with just shut down. But prior to
Mm.
that, she was having migraines every day, and she rarely gets migraines. So, and now she
Mm.
doesn't have them now that the work, you know, is over. So I used to have issues with it manifesting physically. And then another thing that I think tends to be a little bit more scarier is just the emotional aspect,
Mm.
that you just kind of tend to detach, emotional and mental aspect, detach yourself from the situation in a sense.
Mhm.
Like you just keep
Mhm.
going. It's like this kind of numbness. You just keep going and going and going. And
Mhm.
at some point it starts to affect it affects your mental health. It affects your ability to function because,
Mhm.
some people might look at me and ask, like, how do you deal with all the sick patients, and you dealing with death in the hospital and all that stuff? And I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm just like, oh, like I know this sounds really bad, but it's like we can declare someone dead, and then the next minute you go and eat. Like it's like your body just moves on. It just
Mm.
and it's not, and mentally you might still be like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? What happened? But you kind of just you cope with it by detaching yourself from the situation. And that's what I was doing. I detached myself from situations a lot.
Mhm.
But the problem is when it starts to pile up, you start
Yeah.
to build this kind of resentment towards the job. It's like, it's just like, why? Why do I have to do this? Why
Mhm.
is this the case? And the resentment starts to come out in small ways every now and then. Like
Mhm.
for me, I was not trying to go above and beyond for my residency program. Like I
Mhm.
liked my residency program, but I reached a point to which I was like, nope, I can't. Like I can't. Like nope, not doing it, because it's like
Right.
you're already taking up so much of my life. Part of the
Mhm.
burnout was just not being able to have enough time to, you know, go out, enjoy the sun,
Mhm.
go for a movie, hang out with friends, do all that stuff because you're too busy working. So a lot of these normal things that you do, because I know we talked
Mhm.
earlier, Chol, when you said you gave an example earlier about how it was so hard for you to schedule, like I don't know if it's a dental appointment or something like that.
Yeah.
Things like that, where just imagine if you're working 6 days of the week for a whole month straight, and you're working,
Mhm.
that's Monday to Friday with either Saturday or Sunday when you're working. When are you going to
Mhm.
work? When are you going to get time to go and see a physician? Like you end up just
Right.
neglecting yourself, neglecting some of
Yeah.
the other things that need to be done, or you just can't do them. Like it
Mhm.
becomes really um stressful, and something ends up suffering in your life. And for me, because work is dealing with human lives,
Mhm.
it can't be my work that suffers. Some people, it's
Yeah.
their work that ends up suffering when they're burnt out. And I think for us, by the time you get to the point where work is suffering, it's like you're super, super, super burnt out, like super burnt out, because for the most part, you're just like, well, I'm dealing with
Mm.
a human life. I have no option. I have to somehow make it work, but something else is going to
Exactly.
suffer. So your
Yeah.
personal life will suffer, your social life will something will suffer. Like it's just how
Yeah.
it ends up happening. So you won't have a good balance in life. I feel like I'm slightly better off now that I'm working, but sometimes when my week's on, depending on how my days go, I might come home. I know I'm on duty 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I might come home, even if I come home early or if I come home late, It's like you come home at 7 and you're trying to technically be in bed by like 10. So it's like you have three
Yeah.
hours to yourself so you can wake up on
Yeah.
time. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's hard. Sometimes you literally something, I feel like something suffers. And for me, that's how burnout has affected me at work because
Mhm.
like it's definitely affected more so my social and my like my personal life more so because as I said, I have to somehow still function and perform at work because I don't want to mess around with someone's life because of being burnt
Yeah.
out.
Wow. Wow. I didn't actually think about it that way, especially for you as a medical doctor, because, because even when I think about it right now, in the evening when people are resting up at night, there are doctors on call, right, that are in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
ready to receive patients that something might happen to them. But and you're right, the people who are not doctors and maybe having a typical 9 to 5, maybe it's a desk job, an office job, if they're burnt out with whatever they're doing at work, at the office, they can head back home and say, you know what, I'm just going to sleep it off. Because sometimes, even when I get exhausted, and I feel like I've done above and beyond what I typically do, maybe because there's a due date that I'm trying to adhere to. When that happens, I usually tell myself, like, okay, you know what, I'll sacrifice uh and and forgo like my lunch or something, but I'll sacrifice something. But then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, after all of this is done, I'm going to fall, like I'm gonna go and have a good night's sleep. And typically I'll say, okay, I'm not gonna set my alarm today because I just want to naturally wake up. So I give myself that space and that freedom to do that. But listening to you, I'm like, you can't sleep in. Like, you can't, like, even if you're tired the previous day, you still need to wake up to get back,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, to save lives. So that you can't say, well, I'm sleeping in, I'm taking time off. Whatever is going on with my patients, I wish them luck, right? You can't do that. So,
That would be
um,
great if I could.
uh, yeah, so there is that. That is eye opening, actually, very eye opening. And so I can see how, in a way, would you say that even from the time you have been doing residency, would you say that that is an element of the profession of being a medical doctor, particularly in the US? So I have to be specific. It might not be the case with others, but would
Mm-hmm.
you say that since you started, you were somehow trained to manage this part of, of working and doing what you are passionate about and love, um, and you're just now comfortable with it?
I would say yeah, because um and this has been because as I said, you have to the patient comes first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are exhausted, tired, you're having horrible cramps on your period, you're having I don't know what mention something, unless you're dying.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
ideally you have to still take care of the patient, particularly if you have patients who are like really sick and stuff. This is more pertinent also in inpatient medicine where you work
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital setting with which is more acute so that people can just understand I'm working in the hospital, so it's more a more acute setting.
Mm-hmm.
Outpatient settings, I think it's a bit easier for you to detach and put a hold on, okay, I only want to schedule 10 patients per day, or
Mm.
I will only see, I'll only do work for these many days or something like that. It's easier to do that in the outpatient setting. And it
Mm-hmm.
also tends to be a slower pace. And for the most part, you're dealing with less acute issues. So
Mm.
it's, I think in an outpatient setting, you can more easily manage burnout in the sense that you don't have to necessarily fully put yourself like last in a sense or
Mhm.
second. Um,
Yeah.
but in inpatient, I mean, if I come home and I had a, because I told you, like, for example, my Monday was really crazy and I finished my notes at 11 p.m. Just imagine if I had to work the next day and now it's 11 p.m. and now I feel like, okay, I kind of want to do something to decompress.
Yeah.
So let me watch an episode of anime or something like that. And then by the time I go to bed, it's like maybe 12, 1, and then I wake up at like what, 6. So essentially I don't
Mm.
get enough sleep.
Yeah.
But I still have to keep going, as you said. Like I still have to somehow, you know, just function at a less optimum place. And granted,
Mhm.
you know, this is something that resident physicians have been fighting over the year, and it's better now. I have to admit, it's better now. I because based on the stories I hear from older physicians, but it's like, how do you expect us to optimally treat the human body when you're putting our own human bodies through like just long hours, and we still are
Yeah.
humans and we have to function on less sleep and all that stuff. So that's why they're really
Yeah.
trying to narrow down the number of hours people are working, because it at some point it catches up to you. And the problem is when it
Yeah.
catches up to you, the results can be deadly in certain
Yeah.
situations. Because if you're working in the
Exactly.
ICU and your mind is not sharp, you make a mistake that you might not have otherwise made if you were, you know, more rested, less burnt
Mhm.
out, able to think properly. So I think that's why they actually started making changes. Is because they started to realize that, um, these effects can be. The problem is we very easily we very easily sweep them under the rug, and we're like, no, we have to do this for the patient. But when the body reaches its limit, the
Mhm.
effect, it's not only you who's going to be affected, your patients will also be
Mhm.
affected. And that's when they realize we have to start trying to draw the line. They're in the process of doing it. I don't know how long it will take them to fully get it together, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I actually have a thought around that, but it could come later. But I guess I can start it off. Maybe we're gonna go somewhere with this. I have two thoughts, but the first one I was thinking about is, we might be digressing here. Is I wonder why. At least my understanding is, getting into medical school it can be competitive, quote unquote competitive,
Hmm.
and a select people, number of people are chosen, to go through the medical route, and pursue, a career in medicine. And I always wondered why there is that level of selectivity compared to, like, because you graduate, and I'm thinking, you're gonna, have hopefully like a typical 9 to 5, because, yeah, like, but that's not necessarily the case at this point. And I'm wondering what happens if the system just allows for more people to become doctors, so then you can spend less time, in the hospital, and giving yourself more time to spending with your loved ones, yourself, and enjoying your life. I've never really understood how the medical system works and why it's very selective when it can help with you being less stressed.
I mean, I partially get the selectivity because you just don't want anyone being your doctor, for one.
Mm,
But that aside, there's still so many qualified people who don't make it. And I think it's
mm,
because they don't have enough spots, simple and plain. And it's funny, it's interesting to think about it because the I think most countries in this world don't have enough doctors. So
mm-hmm,
why not make more medical schools, open up more training programs to train more doctors? But I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know what happens in the government and above there to do these things. I have no clue. But I think that would
Mhm.
help. That would help with that would definitely help because if you have more people, you can balance out the time more, and so people can have more time to themselves and have less burnout in general. And then
Mhm.
less burnt out physician helps everyone. It and
Mhm.
things move on well. So yes, that is one of the solutions to in general, like anyone who's burnt out at work because they have too much of a workload, you know, can there be more people? Can it either be delegated more or can there be more
Mhm.
people brought on board to help with it? That is definitely a solution. I mean, I know it's not
Mhm.
as easy as just snapping your finger and it's happening, but it's
Mhm.
something I think a lot of companies can work on.
Yeah, and that's why that's why when we started off the conversation, I wasn't sure, as I said, who was to blame or what was to blame, because
Mhm.
I can see how it could be a systematic problem, or like it could. I can see how, as you said, on the employer side is why don't you just hire more people? And deal with that problem, so and take off the load from your current employees. So, and then even as you were saying with the medical system and the way it works, why isn't there provision to allow for more people to become doctors, and then um, the doctors could get more rest? So there's something there from a system level that could be done, but I wonder if it's not an incentive to do so. Maybe there's somewhere where it means more costs, more expenses, less profit, or, because I can see how a business would say, well, we can have this one person do two jobs and pay them maybe the same salary or maybe just a little bit more so that it's not twice the salary, but at least they're
Mhm.
getting something. And maybe you package it in such a way that you tell the person that they're the greatest worker of all time, and you give them you sprinkle a bonus every now and then after 2-3 months to give them that boost that they are doing a good job. So I can see how companies can sort of try to delay in making a system change and just sort of work with the way things are, and make their money. So that's one way I'm looking at it. um
Mhm.
yeah. But the other thought I had around this is you used the word which I like, and it's so almost sad to talk about it, is detachment. Because
Mhm.
this idea that burnout leads you to detaching from yourself, um, in such a way that you pretty much are like losing sensitivity to your natural bodily responses. So your body tells you you need to be in bed, you're tired, and you should go to bed by 9 p.m. or whatever, like naturally. And then you override that signal and say, well, I can stay up for another 3 hours because, I have to stay up for another 3 hours because of work. Or as you said, you might need to just take a break from the work that you just did. And then, even I'm want to guess that sometimes your eating patterns change because if you're so busy running around looking after patients. In my case, if I'm busier running around going to site visits or something of that nature, I may not actually eat when I'm hungry. And then I suppress my body's desire to have food. And so there's a
Mhm.
lot of like, I don't know, like overriding very natural human signals that we should be addressing. Like, and we're doing all of this because you know is it that's what I was saying, like who's controlling this idea of the burnout here? um because ultimately, as you said, we will ultimately suffer because there's no way that if I don't sleep on time or sleep the way I should be sleeping, somehow my body is going to do something, um, or something is going to change body wise that will impact me either now or later, and I don't know what other illnesses may come about because I have not been just following my natural rhythm of living.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's rather sad. I don't even think there's an excuse for this. Um it's it just feels, just thinking about it just makes me sad about that.
What about you? Like, what has been your experience with workplace burnout?
Yeah, workplace burnout. So to be honest, um I haven't experienced workplace burnout consistently, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is actually a good thing. Um, but also, if you know me, I'm a person that likes to, you know, I'm into wellness and fitness, and so it's a part of my lifestyle to do something for myself each day, and that's a routine I tend to have. Is I'll do something for myself, whether it's as simple as making my favorite meal, going to a workout class, being cheerful, crack a joke here and there. So there are ways that I try to I,
Crack a
I
joke
know.
here and there.
I know. Big fan of listen to my favorite song. Yeah, there are ways you can do this. Seriously, there's so many ways you can kind of get it going. So that honestly helps me keep my stress levels down. But there's one particular project I worked on where it required me to travel long distance to get to the site I was working on. So it was about an hour drive each way. So before I even started the job, I had to drive pretty much 2 hours for the day, and then get on the site, and then while on the site, work for, you know, I think it started off with 8 hours, but technically I could have spent 10 to 12 hours on the job, and that was pretty exhausting. Um, and as you said, it's what really doesn't work really well about all of that is the timing, because you wake up early to get to site, you leave the site at a
Mm-hmm.
relatively late time, especially when things don't go as planned. So if I'm leaving at like 6 or 7 p.m., I'm getting home at 8. I'm trying to eat dinner at 9, and then I have to be in bed literally by 10 to do the same thing the next day. Um
Mm-hmm.
and as you rightly put it, or when you're reading the definition of what burnout is, it now makes sense that the amount of rest isn't technically enough when you have a 12-hour work shift, because you need 8 hours just to feel like you're well rested. At least I want to say science. So a lot of people say 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours of sleep is good for the body, but I'm already past that because I need to wake up early enough to get back to work. And it's not really working out. And so, yeah, I think for me, and then what I realized was doing it consistently, day in, day out. Um,
Right.
and it's just like, it's exhausting. And here's the interesting part. Even when people say, like, okay, the weekend is, I would look forward to the weekend. The weekend was like exciting. I look forward to the weekend. But technically, my weekend wouldn't start until maybe like in the afternoon on Saturday, because I'm trying to recover from all the work I've done, and I'm so exhausted that I don't technically wake up at 8 a.m. on Saturday. I wake up at noon on Saturday because now I'm trying to catch up. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of things don't happen over the weekend in terms of like business hours. I mean, the banks sometimes are open, but if you're trying to get to other appointments, like as you mentioned, doctors, lawyers, accountants, all the other, professional services that you might need, they're not available over the weekend. So it just becomes now, as you said, you become unsettled. It's a very unsettling feeling because you can't deal with your personal life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that has been my experience. But once I got done with that project, yeah, it was very exhausting, and I really had to make a shift. Um, and when I think about you doing this, like you mentioned the 12 hours, wow, wow, impressive. Um, impressive. But during that time, I did detach. I did detach from the way life was, what was happening. You don't even know what's going on in terms of current affairs, and like you don't know what's happening. That's the level of detachment where you're just existing, but you don't even know, you're not aware of what else is going on in the world to get a sense of whether you should do something or not do something. You basically have very little energy and power to do anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean that's why when you think about work burnout in general, it can lead to things like depression, insomnia, you know, all the other physical symptoms you have, workplace dissatisfaction, um, or just a general not I wouldn't necessarily say a hostile work environment, but it's not a pleasant work environment either when you're burnt out. And also just absenteeism, like whether it's mentally, it could be physically, you just the chances of you missing stuff or not being at work or
Mhm.
something goes
Yeah.
up. Um,
Yeah.
so what can we do about it? That
Hmm.
is the $1 million question.
Yeah, that is a very interesting question because I was actually in terms of answering that, I was going to think through whether employees um, make the situation worse. Like,
Hmm.
why do I say that? Because I'm thinking, why does this exist, knowing that it causes us so much like it causes us so much grief, and as you said, it can lead to depression, unhappiness, and it's probably contagious in such a way that people's lives, personal lives, relationships, families are impacted. So it's not just at the workplace. It just spreads. But I'm just wondering, like, okay, why are we even having this discussion if it's doing this much harm to our lives? And I was wondering, like, yeah, are people just making the situation even worse? And I can see why. Like, I can see reasons. For example, um people might want to prove to their managers or to the company or to whomever they're working for, their clients, that they can get the job done. And maybe they can get the job done with less time, with with less time, and maybe they want to keep the contract. Maybe they want to be considered the most reliable professional. I don't know what people's motivations are, but I'm thinking there is this element of wanting to be considered valuable or significant, and so people don't speak up when they're burnt out. Um, so that's one thing I was thinking about. But then, like I said, with the other one, there's the structural side to it, where the way the businesses are run, they're based on wanting to maybe make more profit, and so it's easier to maybe try and see how much one person can do, as opposed to hiring more resources, because it will mean less profits. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on these two ideas, especially the first one? Because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
So, in regards to your question, um, at least the first one, what do I think about people contributing to workplace burnout? So, if you're doing it to get yourself, if you're working extra hard to get yourself ahead in work, to get your promotion and whatever, I mean, technically you're doing it to yourself. The problem
Mm,
is, I think the problem will come in when it starts affecting those around you, and if it starts showing in your work. So, like, maybe you're working so hard that you ironically become less efficient, or you
mm,
start making more mistakes because you're working harder than you usually do. And it's okay to work harder than you usually do, but the problem is when you push yourself too hard, that now your work starts to be affected in some way or the other. To me, that's when it becomes a problem. Working
mm,
hard to get your promotion, go ahead, do it, but you have to also know when to stop, particularly when it starts affecting those around you. It just becomes a thing of, you have to accept the fact that you've got limits, and your body has limits and somehow has to function um, with a good amount of rest, with a good, being in a good emotional headspace, social headspace. So you just have to realize that. And I feel like as employees, it's so important for us to be in tune with ourselves and to
mm,
know how your body feels in certain situations, like know or how your body feels, or what you're experiencing in certain situations, so that you know that, wait a minute, something is off, and I'm
mhm,
feeling I might be slightly burnt out, or like this is not the usual me. It's really, the emotional aspect tends to be harder to even figure out, because you might just be reacting certain ways. You might be hyper reactive to certain situations, or you simply just don't care. And this might be a
mhm,
hidden sign of burnout. Like your
mm,
empathy just dwindling away. Um, that could be a sign of burnout, and you have to be very in tune with yourself to realize some of these things. Um, I think that would be very
mm,
important. Now, that's obviously the one of the first steps, in my opinion, to dealing with burnout, is knowing who you are, being in tune with exactly who you are, and knowing when something is off. Yes, it might be hard mentally and emotionally to figure that out. Physically, you'll have the symptoms. You might not necessarily think they're due to stress, but your doctor might eventually say, after running tests, this is due to stress. Um,
mhm,
but the employer side tends to be a little bit more tricky also, in the sense that I know they're trying to make the most um, money out of you by giving the least. Let's be honest. Like, if they could give you the least amount possible but make the most out of you, I'm pretty sure that's every employer's dream. But it doesn't work like
mm,
that, because you're dealing with human beings who have emotions and all that. So you have to, take care of your employees, or act like you care, and things like that. Um, but
mhm,
from an employer standpoint, I this might sound bad, but I feel like addressing them from a point of, hey, if your employees are burnt out, it'll end up increasing the number of mistakes that are made. It'll end up reducing, ironically, company efficiency, which will end up meaning less profits for you. And maybe if you talk
Mhm.
to them in a way, in a manner that they understand, in like a lingo they understand, they might be more amenable to actually like trying to prevent burnouts, because they realize, ultimately speaking, the company will suffer if my employees are burnt out. So if
Mm.
that means hiring one extra person just to ensure we remain efficient and things happen and we don't have as much mistakes, then we'll go ahead and do that, because this will help my profits in the long run. And it sucks because the proper answer would be, well, as an employer, you should just care in general about your employees' mental health and the employees' emotional and physical health. But let's be real. Does that happen? Do
Mm.
they really care? For the most part, I don't think so.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Oh, those are really good responses, Zell. And as you were saying, I was just thinking it probably would be helpful to deal with this right from the beginning before you even start the job. Like during the interview stage by asking questions, because like I guess maybe this is just adulting 101 or 102, where now when you make a choice, you consider the benefits, but you also consider the risks. Um,
mhm,
because I remember, I think it was on LinkedIn where somebody talked about how they pretty much declined a promotion because um, when he looked at the benefits over the risks, because he realized, okay, I won't be able to see my family that often. I won't be able to see my kids grow up. My kids are, I think his kids were toddlers and he wanted to see them grow up. I won't be able to take travel vacations as much. Like he sort of weighed he weighed that over the higher pay, the significance, and he chose to just take to keep doing what he was doing. Um, and I thought that was a very yeah, at the time I was reading that, I was like, okay, that's very interesting. But now I realize that maybe it is important to really look at the fine print of your contract or your offer letter to say, the benefits are amazing. It looks like I'll be getting this salary, these bonuses, but then what, like, does your company or does the company have something in place for you to recharge, to recover? Because sometimes you find that some companies have very interesting sick leave policies.
mm,
Like they practically expect you not to be sick ever. Um like like it's set up in such a way that, like, okay, what happens if I fall sick? If I can't be at work for this long?
mhm,
Or what happens if I have I don't know, like a punctured tire on my way to work, and like, I don't know if, like, what do they have in place in such a way that, like, for example, you, Zell, you're human. What happens if you can't show up to work the next day and you have like 10 patients that are waiting to see you? Like, what is in place to accommodate you, um, to be able to at least get yourself, seen by a doctor, and get the rest that you deserve? Like, I think it seems healthy to ask an employer those questions before you sign up to get into the job,
mhm,
because that can tell you, you know, like, what they like. It can tell you how the employer is going to react or respond when you can't actually perform. And
mhm,
that's how I'm guessing you can tell how caring, quote unquote, they are about your health and your well-being.
hmm. Yeah. And that just got me thinking. But I feel like a lot of people, when they're applying for those jobs, you're thinking about salary negotiation. Like when you're thinking about these other stuff about, oh, my well-being and all that, it doesn't necessarily. So the first thing that you think about when you're applying for a job. Now,
No.
I feel like it might go higher up your list, particularly if you have a bad experience with it at a certain job. And then now you might
Yeah.
actually be more, okay, I need to make sure this is the case because I got burnt from
Mm.
XYZ. But in general, a lot of
Mhm.
people just don't ask about that. But I think it's so important to do that because it's part and parcel of your, um, your life, your career. But like, I would just say, it also a lot of times for as an employee, prioritizing your self-care and setting boundaries are going to be very important for you as to help deal with workplace boundary and workplace burnout.
Mhm.
Like when you asked, like what happens if you have 10 patients and I get sick, girl, I am calling my boss and telling him I am not coming in, and they can
Mm.
figure out how they're going to distribute those 10 patients with my
Mm.
colleagues. There's usually someone in jeopardy anyways on backup.
Mhm.
So if they need to call in that person, they can call in that person. If that person is already called in at another campus, they'll have to divide the patients among my colleagues. And it will happen.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
I've gotten to a
Yeah.
point where I realized I am not going to sacrifice my well being for others.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
realized I've gotten to that point, and I think it's such a important place to get to.
Mhm.
And um, it's freeing in a way, but it's also, I don't think employers would like to hear it because the employers want you to like work as hard as you can, slave away, do this, do that for the company. Then you come in, you're like, nope, I will do this, and these are my boundaries. This is where I will stop. You need someone to do that extra stuff. Since it's not part of my job description, you can
Mhm.
get someone else to do it. Um, so it's just, I think it's so important,
Mhm.
because I feel like employers are a lot of times only pushed to address it when things go wrong.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so you also have to be proactive on your end to try and prevent things going wrong for yourself. Now, if it becomes impossible because maybe you tried talking to your employer, they're not listening, and you've been trying yourself to keep up with it. I mean, sometimes the worst comes to the worst,
Mhm.
but you got to try at least to manage it from your on
Mm.
your own at least, and also hopefully employers do their bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that I agree. I agree with that. And I was also thinking that that comes with also just knowing that you're competent, right? Like when you work
Hmm.
when you work during the normal hours that you're supposed to work, you're actually doing a good job because I think that is the prime thing is that you're performing at your peak.
Hmm.
Um because if you're not performing at your peak during normal hours and then you're given extra work, it sometimes they also isn't a backing because people might say, okay, like you're not as strong of a performer, so you know that could be a bit interesting there. But I agree with you on the basis that if when you are doing your work, I mean, I don't think I would say, I'm not trying to say that burnout, that people who are not strong performers should experience burnout, but I think it's knowing that you're genuinely doing the best that you can, and you just are put in a position where now you have an overload of work and you start to not perform as well. um because I'm just trying to avoid a situation where some people are just lazy. like
And
like
you use it as an excuse. You're
use
like, I want
exactly.
to avoid burnout. I
Exactly.
mean, I think this is where employer having basic like guidelines in place helps.
Yeah.
I think this is where that helps. because it's like,
Yeah.
no, no. You have to at
Yeah,
least hit this minimum. So,
exactly. Yeah, because I can see how some people can be like they're given extra work and it's like, oh, it's too much. And it's like it's not that extra. It's not that deep.
it's funny because I feel like in every sphere in life there'll be people like that. It's like you can always turn something into like a turn something a total different route you were taking it.
Yeah.
And there's always people who will do that. It's just this. It's a kind of a interesting fact in life. I'm not gonna lie. It's gonna be annoying, particularly if you're the person who is trying to get things done in a certain way. But hey, it makes life colorful.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But no, this is great. This is yeah. Yeah. No, I don't have any much more to say on what other solutions
Yeah,
unless you do.
yeah. I I'm sure there's more out there, but at least we were just touching on it and how we, how from our standpoint we can deal with it and all that. So, well, guys, we have come to the end of another episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Feel free to let us know, what are your experiences with workplace burnout? How do you handle it? How do you deal with it? You can find us on Instagram at the Feminine
Mhm.
Outliers. Please do follow us there. You can also find us on um, Gmail. We might decide to do a Facebook. We'll see. We're on
Yeah.
Instagram. So at least follow us on Instagram and DM us and let us know if you have any questions, you have anything to say. You can also listen to our podcast on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Music, um, Spotify. Please like us, rate us, share with your family, your friends, and whoever you think will benefit from this podcast. Um, we always love to engage with our community as we're growing. And so feel free to reach out to us. And as I said at the beginning of this episode, we are switching our publishing date to Fridays. So until next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid to be an outlier.